Hi. Oh, that's loud. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out today. So I'm Brent Hayden. Grew up in Mission, BC. Spent the last 10 years of my athletic career in Vancouver. And I was an Olympic medalist. I was a world champion, two-time Commonwealth Games gold medalist, current six-time Canadian record holder. I held two world records, and I failed swimming lessons. Yeah. So obviously, success did not come easily to me. You could say it was actually very difficult for me to find success. It wasn't just in swimming; it was pretty much in everything I was doing, whether it was in growing up and playing soccer or baseball. Just one funny story about baseball, actually. Some of you might relate to this, some of you might not. There's always that one kid on the team. He'd sit out as far into the outfield as he could, sit down on the grass, cross-legged, pulling at the grass out by the roots, putting it on his pants, trying to see how big of a pile he could make. So that was me. I was that one kid on the team. I wasn't exactly everyone's favorite team player. I was out there cross-legged on the grass because I was afraid of failure. I was afraid that if the ball came to me, that I would screw up and that I would screw up for everybody else on the team. So I figured if I just put myself away from a situation where I could be that guy that fails and lets the rest of the team down, I would just stay out there. But this one time, this ball actually came to me. So I don't know, this kid must have made it into the major leagues or something because I was way, way, way out there. And the ball's rolling across the grass, and I run up to it, I pick it up, and I just kind of panic. I've never been in this situation before. And I'm looking at the runner. He's running to first base, and he's running to second. And I'm thinking like, okay, but I got a guy on third who's going to run to the home plate. So I'm thinking like, okay, where do I throw it? And I just hear somebody, probably the coach. He just screamed, "Throw the ball home!" And so in my moment of panic, I turn around. I face the direction of my house, and I throw the ball over the fence. Needless to say, in that moment, I failed. I let the team down, but I learned something. I learned what throw the ball home meant. And it was the same in soccer. I was again one of the worst kids on the team, if not the worst kid on the team. In my very first game, I get the ball and I'm running with the ball, and I feel like I'm on a breakaway, and I'm feeling so proud of myself. I've never been in this situation before. You know, it's my first game, and people just start screaming my name, Brent, Brent, and it's making me run even harder. And then my own teammate comes up beside me, and he takes the ball away from me, and he runs in the opposite direction. Because nobody told me that when we were in the game, we are supposed to shoot against the other goalie. So I learned something. I learned in the game, even though you're practicing shooting against your own goalie in practice, you're supposed to shoot against the other goalie in the game. But we're not born with the fear to fail. Okay, when we learn to walk, imagine how far we get if every time we fell, somebody pointed out at us and said, "You failed," or they handed you a report card with an F on it. No, you take a step and you fall, and you learn from it. You get up and you try and make two more steps and you fall. And it's the same thing when you're riding a bike. You know, you take the training wheels off and you're riding around and you fall down. And what happens when you fall? You might get scraped up, you know, on your knees or your elbows. You clean it up, you put a band-aid on, you learn from the mistake, and you go again. And in life, we keep doing things this way. We're learning that failure is an essential part of learning. Because your parents or your teachers or your coach, they can tell you things so many different ways. But until you truly experience the failure of that situation, sometimes it's the only way that you're going to learn to adjust. When I got to my first Olympic Games, I was 20 years old. I'd spent my whole life kind of imagining what it was going to be like to swim at the Olympics, that it was going to be this huge, big, magical moment, that everybody goes to the Olympics and succeeds. They might not all win a medal, but at least they'll all perform their best. You spent your entire life preparing for this one moment that, how do you do anything less than perform your best? And I got to the Olympic Games, and before the competition started, I had already kind of jinxed myself, or I pretty much already ruined what was going to be my competition. I had this, it was this power adapter, because our clocks didn't really have alarm clocks yet, so we still traveled with travel clocks. So I had this power adapter, and it had this high-low switch on it, and I didn't check it. I didn't see if it was on low or on high. I just put it in the wall, plugged it in, set my alarm for 7 o'clock, went to bed thinking I was going to wake up at 7 o'clock. Not realizing that the setting was actually set to high, so my clock actually ended up running extra fast. So when my alarm went off, I thought it was 7 o'clock. I got out of bed, I got my tracksuit on, I checked my bag, made sure I had my training suit, had my racing suit, my goggles, put my backpack on, walked out the front door, and I kind of looked up and I realized, wow, it's really dark for 7:30. By 7:30, by the time I actually got out the door there, I was like, oh well. Just kept going to the cafeteria, walked all the way there, walked into the cafeteria. I'm looking around and nobody's there. It's just me. I'm thinking, okay, something is wrong. Either the Olympics already over and I overslept, or it's really early. So I pull out my phone and I call my team manager, and it took me a couple tries to get him to answer. And kind of answered, he's like, hello? I'm like, what time is it? Like, it's 3:30. And that was pretty much the end of my competition right there, because I panicked. My heart rate started fluttering like crazy. I went all the way back to our dorms. I just ripped off my shirt, pants, and just jumped into bed and just put my head on the pillow, and I was like, okay, just go to sleep, just go to sleep, just go to sleep, just go to sleep, just go to sleep. And if you ever try to go to sleep the night before Christmas when you're a 5-year-old kid, it doesn't work. The more you try and tell yourself to go to sleep, the more awake you become. So I just basically spent the next 4 hours wide awake, dreading what it was that I was going to be doing, because I was suddenly already zapped. I felt like I'd already done my competition. So I get to the pool, and I'm taking power naps. I'm taking over the massage table, and I'm just got my head on, a bunch of clothes in my bag. I'm trying to sleep, just trying to get some rest in. Right before the race, my coach hands me a Coke. Says, here, you need this. So I chug the Coke, and I go to the ready room, and I get up on the blocks, and this is for our 4x2 meter freestyle relay. And I went, I think, about 3 seconds slower than what I had just gone in the Canadian trials, and we missed the medal by less than 2 seconds. My time alone was enough to make up for the difference to get us onto the podium, and so I became known as the single reason why the entire Canadian team left without a medal. My own teammate ended up calling me out on national television. He didn't call me out by name, but he says, a very specific swimmer on this team, didn't really do his job. And so after the games, I was very, very upset with myself. I took some time off from the pool, and I actually was contemplating quitting at this point. I spent a lot of time talking to my sports psychologist. I was having private meetings with my coach, and I just realized that I can't quit. There is a lesson here that I need to learn. Okay, because through my failures, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to adapt, and I'm going to move forward. And so I had 4 more years to make up for that mistake, or to learn from that mistake. And so going to the 2008 games in Beijing, now I'm a veteran. I have the experience. In 2007, I became world champion. And so I'm going into these games now, and every time I would, sit on my computer, I'd Google my name to see what people are saying about me. It's like, whether it's in the province or national post or, on Facebook, or people were always talking about the medal that I was going to win, or, I'm Canada's best hope at getting a medal. And so this started going to my head, and I started walking around like, wow, I'm a world champion. I'm going to become an Olympic medalist. And I got to the games, and I walked up for my semifinal, and I still had the 4x200 meter freestyle relay that same night. So in a way, I was kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll save a little bit of energy in this 100 freestyle semifinal. I only need to come top 8. I don't need to succeed today. I just need to have enough energy to do the 4x200 meter freestyle relay, because that's the relay that let everybody down 4 years ago. And so I tried to strategize the 100 meter freestyle. And again, I don't need to succeed today. And immediately, right off the blocks, last place. Came up at the 15 meter mark, started taking my first few strokes, and I'm already looking at the guy's feet in the lane next to me. And I just panicked. I just thought, oh my God. I tried to get back into the race. I swam that race 100 or even 110%, but I couldn't get back into it, especially when you get behind somebody's feet and you're basically fighting against their wake splashing over the lane. Because in swimming, you can actually draft if you get up on the wave, but I was on the opposite side of that. So I wasn't quite able to get up on it and to be able to ride that wave back into contention, and I ended up in 12th place. I didn't have the opportunity to swim the 100 meter freestyle final, even though I was a world champion. But in the 4x200 meter freestyle relay that night, I was fired up. I guess you could say I was kind of angry at myself. And I dove into the pool. I was the third leg of the relay. When I dove in, we were in 7th place. When I touched the wall, I brought us back into 2nd. All because of what that failure earlier in that day did for me. It got me angry. It made me realize how unacceptable not trying to succeed was, trying to strategize when you needed to go. And we ended up 5th, but I couldn't be more proud of our team's accomplishment, because on paper, we probably shouldn't have even come 5th. So that was a huge success. Not all successes are measured in wins and losses. Sometimes your successes are measured by your own performance. So for my 100 meter freestyle, I didn't perform, but I know I performed in my 4x200 meter freestyle relay, and I didn't let my team down. But I had to take 2 months off after those games. 2 months because I was still so heartbroken over what transpired in the 100 meter freestyle that I had a chance to become Canada's first ever medalist in the 100 meter freestyle. I even had a chance to win gold. But I didn't try to succeed. I thought I would do that the next day. I also realized another mistake that I made. I was expecting to succeed. Because sometimes when you expect to succeed, that is often when you're going to fail. I'm sure some of you can relate to this. You're expecting a certain result, and you go in thinking that it's just going to happen because you're prepared, you've done all the hard work, it's just going to happen, and then it doesn't. And then you also had moments where you kind of just don't expect anything, and that's also when you succeed. Okay, so in that moment, the failure came down on me, and it told me, you can't expect success. You have to be determined to make it happen. So I spent the next 4 years making up for this other mistake. Made the team again, so I had a third time, and started thinking like, oh, well, maybe third time will be my charm. But 2 weeks before the games, we're staging in Olbia, Italy. And 2 weeks before the games, I suffered a back spasm. Now, I'd been plagued over the last 4 years at this point by these chronic back spasms, and they would take me out of the water for a day, maybe 2, but I would still be able to walk around and do things. So I was never fully, sidelined. I would just kind of take a break, walk it off, and I'd get back in the next day. But this spasm was so bad, I spent 4 days barely able to walk. My workouts 2 weeks before the Olympic Games was just trying to walk to the end of my hallway. Every day I was getting massage therapy, physiotherapy, getting my chiropractic, but nothing was working. My back just wouldn't loosen up. But on the fourth day, I made myself go to the pool because I decided that if I can't make it happen, I'll just fake it. I'll act as if everything is okay, and I'm just going to get myself back into the process. And so I went to the pool very slowly, and I'm there on the pool deck, and I can see my coach looking at me. And he looks at me and he goes, "Okay, what's up?" I look at him, and it's just this thought that had been popping into the back of my head over the last 4 days. It was getting louder and louder and louder. And I just looked at him and I said, "I don't want to retire before the Olympics." And he says, "Why don't you?" You see, I had had this fear of failure popping back into my head. Whereas before, I was never really that afraid of failure. It's always just been, again, it's always been an essential part of learning. As much as you don't like to fail, but it's just kind of a part of the process. And every time I failed, I've always learned it. But I was inherently fearful of failing again in front of everybody, that I was starting to think that maybe it would be better if I just walked away. Pulled myself away from the equation. I becoming that kid sitting way out in the outfield again. And when he said, "Why don't you?" it just made me erupt. I essentially just blew up in anger. He wasn't telling me what I wanted to hear, but he was telling me what I needed to hear. He needed me to face that thought in my head. And within 2 days, my back was better, I was training perfectly, and I was off to the Olympic Games. Now I went up to that semifinal, and I realized that I have to swim this race like it's my last, because I know that there's not every day you're going to have another opportunity. So I swam that race like it was going to be my last. And I got into the final, came in 6th place. I was 2/10 from not making the final. Whereas 4 years earlier, I was 2/10 from also not making the final, but on the other side of it. So this time going into the final, realizing that this is my last chance. I had nothing else to swim for except my entire life behind me and everything, all my failures that have been building me up to this moment, from what happened in Athens, the failures, learning from it, learning from my failures in Beijing, moving forward. All my strengths, or all my weaknesses, were now my strengths. And by the time I got to London, I had experienced every level of failure that nothing was going to be able to stop me. I was 5 years older than any of the other swimmers. I wasn't able to walk for 4 days 2 weeks ago. And that is when I had my most success and when I got my bronze medal. So there is a quote by Thomas Edison. They asked him, "When you failed so many times making your light bulb, why didn't you just give up?" And he said, "I've never failed. I just learned 10,000 ways that won't work." So, we shouldn't fear failure. We should embrace failure as the most honest teacher, the most honest coach, the most honest peer that we're ever going to have. Because, like my coach, failure will always tell you what you need to hear. Thank you.